Oh, yeah. Yes, me buddy. All right, well, our story begins almost 2,000 years ago inside of Greek mythology. It starts about a man named Narcissus. Narcissus was handsome, charming, charismatic, so of course he caught the attention of everyone around him. One day, Narcissus was walking in the woods, and on that walk, he came upon a stream. So he decided to take a little bit of a break, knelt down, saw his own reflection, and experienced a feeling of true, unwavering, and deep burning love of himself. Now, because Narcissus was the complete checklist of things that women saw in a partner, he of course more often than not caught the attention of the women around him. But while Narcissus was marinating in the admiration, he had zero connection with any of them and really had no intention of making one. Going back to that stream where Narcissus was staring longingly at himself and taking in, well, himself, you can imagine how thirsty you're probably going to get staring at yourself for a little while. So after a couple days, he bent down to take a drink of water, and when he moved closer, he saw his reflection looking back at him and instantly fell deeper in love with the image reflecting back on him. His confidence and ego took the wheel at this time, and then finally, he shot his shot and went in for a kiss. When Narcissus moved towards the person he sees in the pool, he reached out to hold them, and the reflection just disappeared. Narcissus is now alone. His one true love has left him, and he can't fathom the agony of unrequited love and admiration. Narcissus laid by the pool of water, unable to lift himself, unable to eat or drink. He was completely destroyed by the rejection of the reflection in the water and started to waste away. The earth of the ground underneath him took over his now lifeless body. Fast forward a few days later, and also remembering that this story was wrote in the year 8 AD, a group of wood nymphs floated through the woods and came across the pool where Narcissus once lay admiring himself. In place of his body was now a single patch of yellow and white flowers that had a slight bend to them and leaning in the same direction of his reflection. These flowers are now known to the world as the Narcissus. And that's narcissism. Or is it?
Do you personally know someone you would consider to be a narcissist?
Yes, I do.
Yes, I know several people I would identify as narcissists.
Yes, I do.
I would say I do.
Yes.
I mean, I feel like a lot of people are just like naturally full of narcissism. Well, not full of it, but just like they have some sense of entitlement to themselves and feel like their stuff is more important than other people's things.
People use very colloquially the word narcissism to mean self-absorbed or not behaving in a way that is considerate and kind and thoughtful to others.
Narcissist.
Narcissistic.
Narcissist?
Narcissistic.
Narcissistic.
Narcissism.
Personality disorder.
Narcissism is a trait that's alive and well in the 21st century, perhaps especially in North America. It's been argued and demonstrated that we live in an age of entitlement where narcissism seems to be on the rise.
My name is Dr. Emily Blake, and I'm a psychologist practicing in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. And the clinic is called Blake Psychology, and we have a great team of therapists and office in various locations so that we can provide a full range of services to clients.
So I'm Dr. Simon Sherry, and I am a clinical psychologist and professor in the Department of Psychology and Neuroscience at Dalhousie University. As a clinical psychologist, I also own and operate a practice called Crux Psychology. Both in my research and in my practice, I spend a lot of time trying to understand disordered personalities, including narcissism.
My name's Carl Knickerbocker. I'm a family law attorney in Austin, Texas. I'm also the creator of Unapologetic Parenting, which is a social media platform that focuses specifically on people going through high conflict divorce and custody disputes with narcissistic and high conflict exes. I'm also the author of the best-selling Parallel Parenting Solution. When it comes to high conflict divorce and custody disputes, I've been through it, I've seen it all, navigated it all myself.
Hi, my name is Mallory Beckwith. I'm a LPC associate licensed in the state of Texas, and I opened up my own private therapy practice. It's called Therapy with Mallory, and my main specialty is helping victims of narcissistic abuse.
What is your understanding of what a narcissist is?
A narcissist is what we all are, on different degrees, different levels.
I would say a narcissist is somebody who lacks the ability to empathize with other people, and really is very self-centered in their worldview.
Someone who thinks more about themselves than other people, maybe to an extent that kind of makes them look kind of like a bad person in a way.
Yeah, they just lack the capacity to put other people before them. They're only capable of seeing the world through their own eyes, and they're challenged by trying to put others before themselves. They have a me-first mentality.
So I think it's someone, it now has the meaning of being very self-centered and very vain, possibly. I think there's a bit of that too.
I think people who are able to exploit people interpersonally for their own gain, people who have very grandiose thoughts, maybe a god complex, if you want to categorize it as that.
While the increasing trend of using words commonly used in a psychiatrist's office is nothing new, especially within the digital age, the ability to understand not only the words, but the dangers of misusing these terms to be applied as labels is paramount. In the field of psychology, there are 3 categories of personalities currently listed in the DSM. Moving your focus to cluster B, that's divided into 4 personality types: antisocial, histrionic, borderline, and then the hidden gem and one of the top psych terms used, narcissistic. The issue that professionals face to make a diagnosis is these disorders all have overlapping and similar traits. Traits like being dramatic, overly emotional, difficulty maintaining stable relationships, traits that can cause distress to others, traits that challenge treatment options such as mental health conditions that align with the associated behaviors such as depression, anxiety, and addiction. But in present-day society, we apparently don't need these professionals. It merely takes a breakup or a disagreement, and the wheels of diagnosis are in motion.
With respect to understanding narcissism, from that perspective, we look at narcissistic personality traits as lying along a dimension. And you might imagine situating any human along that dimension from 0 to 100. And you could then differentiate person A from person B in terms of their level of narcissism.
Tell me the diagnosable traits a professional would use to diagnose narcissistic personality disorder.
Yeah, I think kind of just similar to that, like somebody who believes that they can accomplish anything and takes risks to do so.
I definitely cannot, no.
They're deeply insecure, and they compensate for it by having a sense of grandeur and bravado. They feel very important. They see themselves as the center of the universe, the stars of their own story, and they see everyone around them as bit players.
Yeah, I don't know, honestly. I don't know that one.
Mainly, from what I recall in my studying of that, trying to figure out if I was a narcissist, is that a narcissist is someone that they cannot put themselves in another person's shoes and therefore not feel genuine empathy without a price tag or getting something in return.
When someone wrongs us in one way or another, or they may just seem full of themselves, we instantly label that person as a narcissist.
Did you see that? The new kid. He took it.
Whoa. And while that statement may seem true on the face of it, it's actually also incorrect. If we were to go with that approach, even just using social media as a reference, everyone's a narcissist. The posts about accomplishments, showing things like trips, new cars, new homes, showing off their bodies with completely irrelevant captions, and of course the filters, editing, and selfies, selfies, selfies. In that regard, statistics and numbers in science and medical research are just dead wrong.
Some of them act badly because they've had a hard life or have been mistreated. Some of them are just jerks. Stop that, Mr. Simpson.
Behavior is how people act. It's learned and adapted, but can also be changed or corrected quite easily. Traits are who we are as people. Digging in more deeply on that, though, our traits can dictate our behavior, and that one aspect is why being honest about intention behind your behavior is far more important in terms of self-awareness, and even more important if you're working with someone in the mental health field to address issues or challenges you may be having in your life.
In contrast, when we talk about narcissistic personality disorder, we're talking about a category, a discrete and separate category. And we look at a number of symptoms, and if you have a certain number of those symptoms, then you cross a cut point, then you cross a line. And over that line, we imagine that these are the people with narcissistic personality disorder, whereas these individuals over here do not have that disorder. So narcissism and narcissistic personality disorder are just two different ways of conceptualizing and slicing up the narcissism construct.
The term "you're a narcissist" or "he's a narcissist" is very often thrown around if someone thinks someone is egotistic or full of themselves or kind of an asshole.
The narcissism is so present, it's always present and always there, that it becomes the dominant characteristic, which is why they get sort of shorthand labeled as narcissists.
So if you look up narcissistic personality disorder in the DSM-5, there's criteria for a narcissist. And it's not just, oh, he's full of himself, or oh, he looks in the mirror a lot. It's actually a real, true personality disorder.
Now that the foundation's laid for what narcissism is from a clinical perspective, it's important to know how these personalities present themselves. This is often referred to as the type of narcissist.
Hey, Mr. Narcissist, tell me about my arrogance. No more counseling, I don't negotiate with therapists. God, yeah, wanna let God in.
There's one shared item that's common between most of these types of narcissism, and it is a thing that's called the narcissistic mask. Anyone who has ever experienced any form of a highly narcissistic person knows this mask incredibly well. It's the proverbial veil that they wear in public and around other people, and should that mask ever be removed, exposing them for who they truly are.
Sorry that I didn't hit you across the face in a proper slap, but I was hitting you. It was not punching you.
And how they truly treat people, it can be devastating to anyone who catches their wrath.
Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and yes. I know it's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
They're absolute masters when it comes to manipulating people and situations, and this mask is what helps them accomplish that. They will alter or stretch the truth, leaving out details that involve their questionable behavior, because narcissists cannot and will not be held accountable in their mind.
Your Honor, I respect you and I respect the jury, but I did not do this, and I am not suicidal. And if anything happens to me when I go in there, I did not do it to myself, and you must all know that.
They will present themselves as victims when they're actually the aggressor. Shockingly still, they will even go as far as to create completely fabricated versions of events, and they do it all to get attention, validation, or praise with absolutely no remorse and no regret for their actions and how it impacts others on such a deeper level. Arguably, you'll see covert narcissism be the primary presentation of self.
So people with this, or NPD for short, they can also feel very vulnerable and even depressed. And this is people who are more in touch with the shame. So they can do things that might appear self-deprecating, which is really a way to elicit praise from others.
Covert narcissists can be all around us. They're in our families, they're in our friendships, they're in our romantic partners, they're in our workplaces, but the one place that they're sure to let that mask drop and show their true colors is inside a courtroom pertaining to family law.
Anytime you're dealing with a high conflict custody dispute, and the parties are not able to come to any kind of compromise, it is pretty much guaranteed that at least one person in that dynamic is going to be in that cluster B personality disorder range and exhibiting very, very high narcissistic traits, if not actually having narcissistic personality disorder.
There's the side that they show to the world, which is really a false self that they need to constantly prop up to keep it going.
We have an inflated sense of self. Most North Americans, for example, believe that they are special, important, and unique. They see themselves as better drivers, better lovers, better workers, better students, and everyone cannot be superior to everyone else. That's mathematically impossible.
Narcissists are incredibly believable in court. And there are a couple different ways they accomplish that. One is the victim role, where they will show up and they will cry victim. They are the martyr, they are the saint, they are the victim of abuse. All the things that they themselves typically have actually done to the other party, they will then claim to be the victims of that.
So because they feel inferior and even worthless, they will overcompensate to appear good and worthy.
They're very good at twisting history and presenting it with a ton of emotion. And they'll show up and they'll be very, very convincing about just how much hurt they have and how much trauma they have and how they've been victimized and how they've been harmed, except none of it's real.
So the core is really a core of shame and envy, and they try to keep that out of awareness using grandiosity, which is really a defense mechanism or coping strategies.
The other way they do it is they will show up on kind of the grandiose end of the spectrum, and they will be very, very charming. And so when you talk about grandiose narcissism or you talk about psychopathy, you talk about that glib and superficial charm.
So when they act grandiose, it looks like bragging, attention-seeking, boasting about how good they are, how smart they are, trying to be very good looking. They can be charming, charismatic, the life of the party.
And so the narcissist knows how to play people. They know how to put on the mask that they need to put on, whether it's the victim martyr role or if it's the very glib and charming and friendly, likable role. They can put on whatever they need to do in order to get what they want and need in the situation.
This is all done to secure narcissistic supply.
You see, narcissists, it's like they have this big, huge ego bucket. They're like a junkie who's looking for their next fix.
If you're watching this and breathing air, there's a good chance that you know the story of the Wizard of Oz. In The Wizard of Oz, the Wicked Witch of the West was able to sit in her castle and command direct obedience and blind loyalty from her flying monkeys. They were always sent to do her dirty work while sitting comfortably in her castle, which really is a cliche that comes to life in movies. These villains have people around them who pump them up and do their work for them without questioning their supreme overlord.
Flying monkeys from the narcissist perspective. So if you're new here, I am a diagnosed narcissist. I have narcissistic personality disorder.
This theory is so prevalent in narcissistic behavior and the narcissistic recovery process that the friends and people doing the bidding for the narcissist are actually nicknamed and labeled flying monkeys.
Flying monkeys, I want you to understand that these are typically people that are either manipulated or they're enlisted to be able to carry out the narcissist's agenda.
If all else fails, the abuser recruits friends, colleagues, mates, family members, in other words, third parties, to do his bidding. The abuser uses them to cajole, coerce, threaten, stalk, offer, retreat, tempt, seduce, harass, communicate, or otherwise manipulate his target.
Internally, they have a really hard time regulating their emotions, so they are externally getting validation. They need other people, which is what we call supply. So they constantly need things from other people to prop up and sustain this false self that they're putting forward. So supply can look like getting compliments or praise or gratitude or validation. And it's also really about power and control, because the more power you have, the more you can control other people to keep giving you more supply. So they create a dynamic with everyone around them to get more supply. So there are big consequences to people who don't fall in line. The way that it works is that people who have narcissistic personality disorder, they have a script in their mind about how other people are supposed to behave and treat them. And when people don't fall in line with the script in their head, they can get very angry and instantly have rage or devalue people.
But like in every great movie, once the villain's alone and has no one to protect them and prop them up, there's always some form of a death.
We can make
And while that might sound dramatic, that's what it can feel like for a narcissist who no longer has their source of supply.
Every narcissist has a source of supply, and they tend to really go after the low-hanging fruit, per se.
So the way that people need air, people with narcissistic personality disorder need supply. They need it everywhere they go. They constantly need it.
If you're super empathetic and kind and compassionate and you don't really have boundaries and you're codependent and you're really willing to just put yourself on the line for another person, that narcissist is gonna, as you mentioned, sense that and go after you.
I just want to contrast between people who don't have NPD. Like, just because you post a photo where you think you look great, or you're proud of your kids and you post a photo, or you're at the beach and you post a photo, it doesn't mean that you're doing this for the narcissistic supply. So while the topography or the form might be posting a photo of something, the function of that is very different. You might just be posting it because you're happy about your day and you want to connect with others, and you have long distance friends and family and you want to share your life. And if you get likes, sure, you'll feel great and happy, but you don't need them. Whereas the narcissist or person with narcissistic personality disorder, they really need those likes. They need it to function. They will feel helpless and angry and rageful or shameful if they don't get those likes. So it's a really different need that they have.
Other people who have stronger boundaries can kind of notice red flags, like notice when a narcissist is doing something a little bit off, and they'll kind of maintain their distance from that person.
And you can think of supply as, let's say, for example, you have your arms handcuffed behind your back. Like, you're gonna feel frustrated and angry and shameful, and that's how they feel about supply. Like, they need to control things. Supply is about control and power and being able to press that button like a remote control to get whatever they need whenever they want it. If they can get a rise out of you by maybe posting something really controversial on their Facebook or Instagram and social media to get a rise out of people, to get people to argue and be angry, and then they can say, whoa, I don't know why you're getting so angry. Then they feel superior that they got a rise out of you. So it's not always about praise and flattery or validation, but it's to get more laughter, more tears, more submission, more fear, more money, because when they have those things, they get more power and it gives them more control and they can get more supply. And supply is really a transactional interaction. It's a relationship that's always transactional. You need to give supply to be useful to a narcissist or a person with NPD. If you're not giving the supply, you become worthless and replaceable. So you need to give them what they want when they want it. If not, you will face a consequence such as rage, stonewalling, guilt trips, gaslighting, manipulation. There's so many tactics they use to get you to fall in line, to follow their script, and to become what they want of you.
Our world today is a battleground with people picking their sides of topics such as gender, sexuality, politics, and race. Any instance of wrongdoing from inside that sector of society where we identify and we've placed ourselves is simply not plausible because of our side we chose or the people we surround ourselves with.
Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you have to point it all out.
So when our beliefs are challenged, we ready the troops, or the flying monkeys, if you will, and we prepare for any attack that comes our way. However, sometimes we're just wrong.
Now, some of the common characteristics of narcissism include a sense of entitlement.
There's a lack of empathy for others. There's an inflated sense of superiority and being highly resistant to criticism. There is also, which is the topic for today, being highly disagreeable.
While a blatant act of being disagreeable out of rejection of reality that someone is wrong can be a hallmark sign of narcissism, we see this play out every day, namely in the online communities.
Adult bullying is just as prevalent at home, in marriages, in our communities.
If someone addresses poor behaviors or traits in someone, or in this case, a group of people, the area we've aligned ourselves with become extreme and the lines become rigid, which increases conflict and an unwillingness to address the problem.
It's kind of like the difference between major and minor surgery. If I have it, it's major. You have it, it's minor.
When we're looking at narcissism and gender, a lot of the conversation gets swept under the rug by the people in these sectors we place ourselves in. Instead of a place of understanding, it carries tones of yes all men or yes all women, which then fuels the flames of war between misogyny versus misandry.
When seen through the lens of narcissistic personality disorder, about 75% of people who suffer from that disorder are male. That is to say, 25% are female. When we take a more nuanced look at gender differences in narcissism, you see that in general and on average, men are more narcissistic than women. And what stands out in particular is that men tend to be more exploitative and entitled in terms of their levels of narcissism as compared to women. However, that seeming gender difference starts to shrink a lot in magnitude, and there's really not a pronounced difference between men and women when it comes to other narcissistic traits like being vain or exhibitionistic. If you have a culture that pushes men in the direction of being highly individualistic, intensely hyper-competitive, always needing to win, being extremely dominant or domineering, then those types of sociocultural expectations and stereotypes are more conducive to men developing and expressing narcissism.
Another important and crucial element when understanding how narcissistic people move through the world is to know, understand, and recognize the cycle of abuse that they use. There's 4 steps to this process, and it's just an endless loop until the narcissist in your life is completely finished with you, or alternatively, you do a reverse discard.
When a narcissist is about to discard you but does not want to do it directly because they do not want to face consequences, legal, financial, or relational, they make you leave them by pushing you to your limits.
In terms of understanding differences and similarities between psychopathy and narcissism, let us first acknowledge that there is meaningful overlap. When it comes to psychopathy, there tend to be 2 overarching constellation of traits. One has to do with being callous and remorseless in your use of other people, and that has to do with a certain emotional and interpersonal style, how you feel about others and how you relate to others. And on the other hand, another key aspect of psychopathy is having an unstable, deviant, and antisocial lifestyle. Now, when we look at that first dimension that has to do with being callous and remorseless and using other people, narcissism is critically important to that. There's an awful lot of narcissism in that aspect of psychopathy. Psychopaths are often glib, charming, superficial, grandiose, and self-important. In many ways, narcissism resembles the interpersonal and the affective aspects of psychopathy. However, narcissists are not necessarily deviant and unstable and lead a chronic life of criminal behavior. So when it comes to understanding narcissism, you'll often see a grandiosity. People feel very special and important and unique. They can often have, in terms of what's going on between their ears, a lot of fantasies where they have a sense of brilliance and power and specialness and beauty and uniqueness. The core and the key aspect of narcissism, though, would be how it plays out in social relationships. Arguably, the most destructive and malignant aspect of narcissism has to do with entitlement and exploitativeness and being envious and unempathic. So narcissists have a lot of peaks and valleys in terms of how they feel about themselves, as well as a lot of turbulent, intense, and unstable relationships.
In a lot of online recovery communities, you'll often hear people refer to the narcissistic people in their lives as grown babies. They throw tantrums when they don't get their own way, and they often refer to them as a toddler being told no, only armed with more maladaptive life skills to inflict damage than a toddler has.
Fam, if you're a rageful person, people need to really stay away from you, fam. You're a ticking time bomb, man. And you need to go get help. For real.
The number one tool in a narcissist toolkit is to damage their victim's reputation in an effort to keep their mask on and not be exposed for who they really are. You may have heard the reference to a smear campaign earlier, but what exactly is a narcissistic smear campaign?
They're gonna lie, they're gonna manipulate, they're gonna gaslight, they're gonna do whatever they have to do to be able to keep that image and be able to keep that mask up.
A narcissistic person's accusations are generally admissions of their own behavior that they're trying to hide, and unfortunately, going back to the conversation of the sides we choose in present-day society, anyone who shares common beliefs with a narcissist, they're now a flying monkey for them.
We're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women, and we're probably not going to be cheering so much for some of them.
People who actively take part in outrage culture are always quick to jump to believe the first version that comes out because they want to feel like they're fighting for someone who was abused and mistreated. In reality, they're now committing acts of abuse onto someone who has already been victimized, and in some cases, it was life-altering trauma. So now we're presented a situation of a narcissist manipulating their own flying monkeys and their own supporters.
You mean you don't know?
No,
Look.
The narcissist, as well as their flying monkeys, are now perpetuating further torment and gang up on their victims who most likely are still reeling from the mistreatment behind closed doors.
Defamation is a really interesting area of law, one that is not used as much perhaps as it should be.
When we deal with narcissists in the custody litigation setting, we constantly see false allegations. They will bring false allegations about their ex. They will make up all manner of things about their parenting. They will make up claims about domestic violence. They will just make things up and then use that as a way to try to sway the court away from the truth.
They see everybody as an extension of themselves. So, for example, let's say you see a cup and you want to pick it up, or a pen. So, you tell your arm, okay, you need to pick up this pen. So that's how they view other people. Like, other people are their arm, and other people should pick up the pen when they want them to. They want to have control over people.
And so a lot of times they'll use false allegations, especially when the other side is trying to hold them accountable for things they actually did. And so the tactic of using false allegations, it starts to move the court away from objective truth toward this fiction called the truth lies somewhere in the middle.
So they want to hold the remote that when I want you to do something, you're going to do it. When I want you to give me praise, I will tell you what I did for you. Or gratitude, like I want you to thank me again and again for all that I've done for you. Or they can even try to bait you into arguing with them. Because if they get you to argue with them, then you lose your temper and then they can be the victim, which is a very familiar and comfortable position for them. They can say, look at what you did. You say, I yell. Well, look at you. You're yelling. But they baited you to yell. But it serves their purpose. It creates a supply for them of superiority. They made you lose your cool. Then they can say, oh, I don't even know why you're overreacting like this. You're so sensitive, which is gaslighting. So then you start to feel crazy.
And so one of the narcissist's favorite games to play is to go to the opposite extreme of what's being brought against them. So if they're being accused properly and objectively as being an abuser, as being emotionally abusive or being neglectful of the children or whatever have you. They will invent all sorts of false allegations about past domestic violence, parental alienation, all manner of things about their former partner.
You end up behaving as a narcissist because they bait you into doing it, and then once you do it, they shame you for doing it because they're projecting their own shame onto you.
They take advantage of this logical fallacy in the courts called the truth is somewhere in the middle. So they create a false middle and try to bring the court to that place. And they do that to tear down their former partner. They do that to tear down the other parent. They do that to avoid accountability, and they do that to completely mislead the court to start viewing the case in this fictional way.
Over the last few years, the world has watched public defamation cases in the United States play out in the news as well as online on sites like YouTube. People picked their sides and they dug their feet in according to what side they aligned themselves with. We watched as Amber Heard, Donald Trump, Alex Jones, and Rudy Giuliani lost defamation suits, and it all played out right in front of our eyes. Narcissistic people think they're above the law when it comes to slanderous and defamatory behavior on social media. They feel it is telling, quote, their story, or leveraging cancel culture to obliterate their victim, when in reality, it's a ploy to protect themselves and erode their victim's support system, so when that person eventually speaks out, no one is going to believe them.
Even though you knew you were innocent, even though you knew all the allegations against you were wrong, like you said, some of the mud sticks.
While the legal system is not black and white in reference to navigation and legal rulings, the US and Canada operate differently under defamation law. In the last 2 years, we've seen $1.7 billion in public judgments against people who have been found guilty of defaming others in the United States. How defamation in Canada works might just shock you and make you reconsider how you tell your story. Or, as a flying monkey, how you share a story, because the facts and truth matter more than opinion or what you've been told. You can read about a case out of British Columbia of a woman who was found guilty of defaming an ex-boyfriend after a breakup. Pretty common stuff. People break up, they say mean things, that's just life. But her allegations were ruthless and incredibly damaging. The victim then pursued her in the courts under defamation law. What wasn't shocking the slightest, though, was the defendant not only was doubling down on everything, she wasn't willing to be held accountable, and her defense actually shifted blame to her friends, saying that they were the ones posting the defamatory statements. I actually reached out to her to see if she wanted to be part of this documentary so she could actually have her say. This was her response. I was once told in a therapy room to always look at how someone behaves online. Then, take a step back and ask yourself this question. If that's the behavior that they let the world see on a public platform, just imagine how they behave behind closed doors.
If someone makes a statement about you or a comment about you to a third person, it's important to recognize the third person requirement. I can say anything I want to you, as long as I don't publish it to somebody else. So it's got to be a publication to a third person, a comment made by me about you that would lower your reputation or image in the eyes of the person that I said it to. So if I said, you're known as somebody who abuses children, if I say that to you, you can punch me in the mouth if you like, but you can't do anything else. If I say to your neighbor that he's someone who abuses children, that's a publication. All I have to prove in the court is that that person said it to a third person, not to me. And the court will determine if the statement is something that would lower your image in the eyes of an independent third person. The burden then shifts to the person who made the statement to satisfy one of the defenses that are available.
Police say it's a crime he didn't commit and they have surveillance video to prove it.
If you speak to anyone who's ever experienced narcissistic abuse, they'll always speak to how their abuser has portrayed a victim in every single one of their stories, going straight back to the day that they met them.
According to what we were told, and now the video that we watch, it doesn't seem to be that the two stories come together.
Narcissistic people have a storyline in their head, and at this point they need to design the set and cast the roles to fill the narrative that they need. From that point, they then move to the position of valor to portray themselves in a light that would be fit for something you would see in a movie. This is where they dig in their toolbox of tactics to make this work in their favor. Much of this behavior will start in the devaluation stage of the abuse cycle, and that will lead to their victims reeling from what feels like a tsunami of thoughts and emotions going through their brain. Disbelief, confusion, anger, sadness. Some people even said they felt concussed and in a different state of mind after this type of experience. Because these types of people have no remorse or regret for their actions or words or treatment of other people, everyone is a pawn in the game. Sadly, that means literally everyone.
For the narcissistic parent, their own children is their favorite tool for inflicting further abuse.
People are often trapped in a relationship with a narcissist, and they feel defeated by that individual oftentimes because there's a forced proximity to that narcissist, be it a romantic partner or a boss or someone else where you just can't pack up and easily leave. And being exposed repeatedly over time to that narcissist is very corrosive to your assertiveness.
By using the children, they're able to do all manner of things. One, they're able to overstep any boundary they want. So when you put in your healthy boundaries and you're saying, I want to keep this person at bay, they use the children to try to bypass your boundaries as much as possible.
Narcissists tend to do a lot of things that break people's boundaries down. You know, they'll really say something that's going to get you, or they'll use scare tactics. And so it can be really hard to maintain your boundaries. But if you maintain your boundaries, you can still kind of convey a love and empathy for the person that they are behind those defenses. You can say, like, I know maybe you're feeling really insecure right now, but you know that I love you. We still have a great relationship, but I can't give you all this time and attention right now.
You want to help people cultivate a sense of assertiveness where they are direct and forthright, and they understand that they have rights, and they understand that they have value, and they will stand up for themselves in the face of the often ridiculous demands and challenges of living with or being around a narcissist.
They also use children as the access point to the court system. So when you talk about the narcissist using the court system and weaponizing that court system against the other parent, the access point is the children. If it weren't for the children, they'd have no access to that system in order to use it to further abuse the other parent.
So you can kind of speak to the person that they are behind all their defenses, because their defenses is really a way to cope with that inner core, which is vulnerable and fragile and full of shame and envy. So when you can have empathy for the core that the narcissist person is struggling with, and you can kind of speak to that core, it can kind of soothe them in a new way that they're not used to being soothed, because they might be used to other people giving them supply, whereas you're giving them something else. You're teaching them skills about compassion and self-compassion and encouraging them to hold that in. Because if they can hold that in and learn to self-regulate, then they won't always need to be grabbing supply from other people.
Emotional connection that often happens between one individual and their abuser.
When I talk in The Only Constant about trauma bonds, I say, when that person who at the beginning showed you so much kindness and so much love and so much consideration.
The pain of breaking a trauma bond can be so intense and so overwhelming that it may feel like your whole world is crashing down on you.
So there's many complicated and complex patterns and interpersonal dynamics that make people very confused when they're dealing with these kinds of people.
You know, when you're first getting out of the relationship and having that realization of everything that's going on, you know, of course, you're going to be extremely curious and wanting to know why they did what they did. Why did they discard you? Why did they just leave you out in the dust or stonewall you or use you?
They can just get very confused, and then they feel guilty and they think it's their fault, and then they try to, repair things, and this creates a cycle where the person with a narcissistic personality disorder creates a dependency in others and they themselves are also dependent. So there's a codependency that ends up forming between people that have narcissistic personality disorder and the people that they interact with.
Going through that is extremely traumatic and hurtful, especially if you've been in that relationship for years. And I think it's a completely normal reaction to want to know what their intentions were. I call it the $1 million question. Whenever clients ask me this question, they ask me, you know, did they know what they were doing? I know they suffer from this personality disorder. Do they know how they were harming me? Did they understand how they were manipulating me and abusing me? You know, all my clients always want to know that question. And, you know, I can't give them a solid answer. I'm not inside the mind of that person, so I don't know exactly if they were doing it intentionally or if it's part of their personality disorder. And my best guess is probably a mix of both. But at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. They abused you, they harmed you, they discarded you. And in my opinion, you need to break free of that relationship and get out.
Digging into early 1900s science, neurologist and physiologist Walter Bradford Canada described the body and brain's ability to react to a perceived threat. This theory dates all the way back to the days of cavemen when they were faced with engaging in a situation or running from it. When you're actually involved with someone living with high levels of narcissistic traits, this is an all too familiar occurrence, sometimes daily.
So when you think of fight or flight responses, well, responses to trauma, it can be fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And some people don't know about the fawn response, which is really a people-pleasing response, where you automatically want to people-please because you think that's going to try to keep you safe. And it might keep you safe sometimes, but it won't keep you safe all the time, because surely, despite your best efforts, you will still not perform exactly and in the way and at the quantity and the frequency that the person with narcissism wants you to. So you're sure to disappoint them at some point and not act appropriately, and then you can be met with rage, stonewalling, silent treatment, gaslighting, guilt trips, other strategies. When people are faced with danger or abuse or violence or threats, they will want to escape to stay safe. And if they can escape, that would be a healthy response. When they cannot physically escape from danger, they will psychologically escape, which is putting up this sort of amnesic barrier or dissociating, and their mind wanders off somewhere else because their body has to stay in that moment. They might live there and they can't escape where they live, but their mind will go somewhere else to keep them safe.
After confronting his girlfriend on her cheating behavior, she begins to break down and act out in an attempt to force him to stay.
Why don't you just listen to me?
I just found.
No!
I found a Tinder
No,
app
you
on
haven't.
your phone. Listen.
No!
You better calm down because you're the one that's
I
doing
can't
something
calm down
wrong.
because you just didn't you hit me. No!
Yeah, I've seen messages.
Yes.
Quite possibly, the biggest asset to someone living with high levels of cluster B traits to garner the most amount of power, to leverage the most amount of control, and to inflict the most amount of damage on their victim was the invention of social media. With an internet connection and only 1 minute to spare, they can do life-changing damage on their victim provided people believe what they're saying.
Narcissists will oftentimes use other accounts. Sociopaths will oftentimes use other accounts.
Through fake accounts, VPNs, and disposable chat programs such as Kik, WhatsApp, or Snapchat, they're going to use anything that can't be traced to them in the shadows of being anonymous to further carry out their smear campaign. However, it's not just about carrying out character assassination. They also do this to stalk, harass, threaten, and to further traumatize their victim with no remorse and having absolutely no one question their behavior because they feel entitled to act this way.
We know that narcissists preferentially seek out social media. Social media is in many ways a playground for narcissists. They like to collect attention and comments and likes and thumbs up and hearts on the internet because that bolsters their self-esteem.
Yeah, there's so many ways that social media can play into this dynamic. People with narcissism, they want to control the discourse. They want to control the narrative. And social media gives them great control over the narrative.
Another thing that's important to understand in defamation cases, there are various types of damages, so-called, that are recoverable. There are damages they call special damages that you actually had to spend. Let's use a car accident as an example. You get special damages to repair your car, to get you a new car, whatever it is. That's the money to do it. All the money you had to spend for somebody to look after you while you were ill, all the things you had to buy, those are called special damages. Then there are known as, they go on to award what are known as general damages. And those are damages, using that example, for your pain and suffering, the fact that you can no longer, say, play golf because it ruined your knee, that sort of thing. Those are called general damages. In Canada, when dealing with pain and suffering for virtually every cause of action, that is for assault, car accidents, and all these sort of things, the courts have limited the amount of general damages to a certain amount that's tied to inflation. So take a car accident, for example. If you're injured and you're going to lay in bed for the rest of your life, you can't do anything, how much money could ever compensate you for that? So the court said, in order to get some sort of certainty going forward, we're going to limit the amount of general damages. So the person that's the worst off, say, at the time was $500,000. That's been increased because of inflation, and so I'm not sure the exact figure today. And so therefore, if you're one who lost a leg, they compare that to somebody who's going to lay in bed for the rest of their life. So it's going to be quite different. Defamation is the only one that is different than that. There is no limit on the amount of general damages that can be awarded in defamation cases.
Narcissists often have an insatiable need for attention and recognition, and so they can seek that out almost relentlessly through various forms of social media like Facebook and Instagram. There are more than 40 studies at this point now that suggest an important relationship between narcissism and social media. I would think of it in these terms. Narcissists gravitate towards something like Instagram, and then that social media platform further strengthens and reinforces their narcissism.
They can document everything they do, put it out for people to see. It can really feed the narcissism because they can count the number of likes, they can count the number of comments, they can control very well the image they're putting out. This false self that they're really trying to create and put out to the world, they can edit it, they can take 100 selfies and post the best one and just pretend like, this is how I woke up this morning, #bedhead, but it's like, okay, you really prepared for that photo,
So it's important to understand the shifting of burden. The things that you have been talking about, someone publishing on Facebook, for example, you have to prove that it was published and somebody read it, so somebody in this jurisdiction. Once we prove that, the burden shifts to the other party to prove that they have one of the defenses available, which would be very difficult. What is also very interesting to me when we're talking about today's publications, internet and so on, that may also give me a cause of action in New Brunswick, New Hampshire, all kinds of other places, because all I have to do is prove publication in the jurisdiction, and that jurisdiction then has jurisdiction over the statement.
Also things like, let's say they do lots of charity work and they're posting about all this stuff that they helped people. And while it's great to help people, it's not the main purpose. They want to talk about how they helped people. It's about how they helped. It's not about the help that those people received.
The court has jurisdiction over anything that happens in its area of jurisdiction. So in Nova Scotia, if you publish something, I don't care how you publish it, whether it's on the internet or in the newspaper or at a party, you make a statement to a third person. You've published a statement that is on the face of it defamatory. In order to prove that, I can go to Google or anyone else and put a subpoena on them and say, I want the records of this person.
Really like an addiction, like how you said, it's like heroin. Like it's really good for them in the moment and then it wears off and they need more. And they need more supply and more supply. And if they don't get it from you, they're going to go get it from someone else.
Often people want to seek out recovery from narcissistic abuse, and they want to seek it out fast. They want to be validated. They want to be in a supportive environment around people that have been through this, and they want to heal, which is completely normal. But just like in every facet and corner of industry, it's imperative to do your homework and seek out a licensed and qualified professional for this. With narcissism being a hot topic and a buzzword right now, of course there will be the very small margin of people that want to capitalize off people who are vulnerable and are feeling displaced. Ironically though, they're generally on social media. They're posting memes and they're posting content while all the while selling classes or courses to sit with them. While the intent here is not to drag anyone in their pursuit of creating a living, it does beg a pretty serious question. That question being why the promise of being a healer for one of the biggest pop culture psychology phenomenons is being sold at a discount price online. You can actually lay claim to certification coming in after less time invested than a regular day of school for kids.
So I think it's really important if you are a victim of narcissistic abuse and you are seeking help for all of the trauma and abuse that you've been through, that you work with a licensed mental health professional. You know, in order to become a fully licensed mental health counselor, you need to get 3,000 hours of supervised counseling hours. You have to pay for a master's degree. You're invested in your career. And because you hold a license, you have to abide by ethical standards and ethical rules. If you're a life coach, you don't have a license. Anybody on this planet can declare themselves a life coach, create a Facebook group, create an Instagram account, hashtags, put videos on the internet, and get clients, and while they might be really good at marketing, I'll give them that, they don't have the schooling, the training, or the knowledge to actually help you process your trauma, learn coping skills, and break free of these abusive relationships.
This girl is the nastiest skank bitch.
The victims of narcissistic abuse want vindication. They want people around them to see who the narcissist really is. They want the truth out, and they want to be believed.
I want you to tell me what you did.
They want to be able to talk and tell their side without the flying monkeys and people carrying out the bullying and abuse by proxy.
I'm summoning my flying monkeys!
But sadly, that's never going to happen. First of all, a narcissistic person will never admit their wrongdoings, ever. So save your breath and save your own mental health. And even if you try and expose them, they have all the ways to deflect, project, lie, and manipulate the situation further, and it's all ready to go. But here's the beautiful thing about it all. Narcissists will always tell on themselves.
Narcissists lie in court constantly. They'll lie in affidavits, they'll lie in their testimony, they'll lie in their depositions. They just lie. That's what they do. They are rarely held accountable though. And the reason for that is, again, one of these false assumptions that is, contained within the court system. And that false assumption is, well, everybody is very emotional right now. Everyone's in this high conflict thing. So of course people are going to just be, saying things that serve their interests. Of course people are going to have different versions of reality. And so the court just looks at it as, well, that's what people in high conflict situations do. And when it's viewed through that lens, all of a sudden, the value of truth in court is thrown out the window. So you can lie and you can perjure yourself all day long, but usually it just kind of gets looked at as, oh, well, that's what people do. That's what people in high conflict custody cases do. And the judges will also frequently look at it in terms of, well, we could hold them accountable for perjury, but how does that achieve more parenting time and more parenting contact if we're putting someone in jail for perjury? Well, it doesn't really, fulfill, the constant and continuing contact between parent and child if we're putting the parent in prison.
A lot of narcissists, they do something called projecting, right? And it's they attribute traits and qualities that they have and behaviors that they have onto their victim. So for example, a narcissist who's abusive might use some manipulative tactics and some projection to say, you're the abusive one, you've harmed me. And in reality, it's the other way around. And this is extremely confusing. Whenever you're in this situation, this is pretty much a classic technique to kind of get a narcissist off your back, but don't give them a reaction. Don't buy into it. Don't buy into the drama. And I know on the inside, you might be feeling cortisol coursing through your body. Your heart's racing. You might be having some disturbing memories. But if you can just stay grounded and do your best to give them the most minimal response possible, I would say that's the best technique that you can do in that particular moment.
When narcissists are finally faced with accountability and ramifications for their actions, they will go to the ends of the earth to ensure that the idea of some form of gag order is used. Now, most people equate gag orders to a legal move, but narcissists can also use manipulation as a gag order. If it isn't through social media and having their flying monkeys pile up on their victim, it can be withholding things that you cherish. Other times, it may also be twisting your words and threatening you about going public with them.
Hey, everybody.
You are
This person
disgusting.
knows everything.
While being very rare, if things have progressed to playing out in a legal setting with a narcissistic person now facing legal action for their behaviors, they will spare no cost to get you silenced. You need to remember a narcissist is mentally, emotionally, and even physically unable to accept accountability and responsibility. They need to protect their persona and reputation, and if they don't, that means the mask slips, that means they're exposed, that means a severe narcissistic injury.
They will absolutely hate you when you expose them. That is their worst fear. And once you expose them, they will go on the offensive because now they hate you. You will see the true evil within a narcissist. They will start their smear campaigns. They will spread lies and untruths about you. They will recruit flying monkeys who believe them to do the same. And they may even go as far as to use the legal system against you. They may try to take your kids away from you in court, or they may try to lie and file false EPOs or restraining orders against you to basically attack you and ruin your reputation.
Lawyers and different court-appointed professionals will frequently use forms of gag orders to keep people from talking about what the process is that they've gone through inside of a custody dispute or custody litigation. So whether it's a custody evaluator who will have requirements in their contract that says you can't talk about the process at all. You can't post anything online at all about what has been done through the custody evaluation process. Or you'll have lawyers that will say you can't post anything online, you can't discuss this publicly, you can't be telling anyone about your experience in the court system. They use it to cover up the behaviors of the parties. They don't want people to be going public and talking out loud about the exploitative and very abusive tactics that are employed by the system itself. They don't want to talk about how the system itself is routinely used as a vehicle for abuse, not only by narcissistic parents or exes, but by the attorneys and professionals that are in that system, that they themselves use it in these very abusive and exploitative ways to strip families of resources, to inflict harm on parents, and to take away just the foundations that these folks need to have healthy families. They don't want people talking about that. So what do? They impose gag orders. You can't talk about this. You can't post about this online. You can't share this on social media. And if you do, you're going to be held accountable with the court. You're going to be sanctioned. You're going to be held in contempt. if you simply talk about your experience. And so they'll take away people's First Amendment rights, their freedom of speech. They'll impose all sorts of restrictions on people being able to talk about their experiences to hide things. They don't want people to know what's really happening in these cases, because if people start realizing that this happens all the time, and people can start organizing, and people can start realizing what's really going on in these cases, it would force change, and that change could massively alter the dynamics of a, $40 billion a year family court industry. People don't want you to be messing with that. They want their money.
When a narcissist has harmed you mentally, physically, spiritually, and emotionally, again, that natural reaction is wanting to serve justice to be served, wanting to get back at them and wanting them to hurt too, but I have a really strong belief in, spirituality and the universe, and you could even call it karma, right? But what goes around comes around. And even though you might not be there to witness what they're going to have to face later on and the consequences they're going to have to face later on because of their extremely abusive actions, they will have to face what they've done at one point or another.
But it leaves two questions still unanswered. First one, what can I do to get back to who I used to be before I met this person? And the second, if these people are completely unable to be self-aware due to a disordered mind and a way of living their life that requires stealthily mistreating others, can they ever truly be healed and healthy?
A key thing about understanding narcissistic abuse is that it is abuse. And at the start of treatment, people often need education to understand what has happened to them in terms of the abuse that they have received. Beyond that, people often need help learning to regulate their emotions, having been through those abusive experiences. And fundamentally, that experience of abuse can alter how you feel about yourself, other people, and the world. And oftentimes you need to take a look at how that abuse has impacted you between your ears in terms of how you think.
Coming to the realization that you've been abused by a narcissist is incredibly excruciating, heart-wrenching, and painful. And so that first phase of coming out of denial, your whole world is pretty much going to be shattered.
When we understand narcissistic personality disorder, and it's really important to notice that it is on a spectrum. So there's lower levels and higher levels of it. And rehabilitation can happen more at, let's say, the lower levels. Like at the extreme would start to be things like a sociopath or a psychopath. They might not be rehabilitatable. They might have zero desire to change, no guilt or remorse.
It's important that you have support to help you get through this crisis. It's kind of tricky whenever you do come out of denial that you've been in a relationship with a narcissist, whether that's your partner, your mom, your dad, a boss, a sibling. You have to be careful because you don't want to just confide into anybody about the trauma that you've been through and the fact that you are having this realization. So my best advice would be to contact a professional, a licensed therapist who specializes in narcissistic abuse, so they can kind of help guide you through this process of breaking out of the relationship in a safe and healthy way.
If you look to the scientific literature, there's little cause for optimism about treating narcissism. There are other forms of disordered personality, such as borderline personality disorder, where we've absolutely had success in treating that form of disordered personality. In contrast, scientific research on the treatment of narcissism is only in its infancy. There's been very little attention paid to that problem, despite its obvious societal importance. So there's a lot we still need to learn about treating narcissism.
If I was going to be able to sit down with the narcissistic other party, and if I had that opportunity to just be like, all right, everybody else out of the courtroom, we're just going to have a talk, and I'm going to try to open your eyes so you can see what you're doing, they're not going to see it.
Finally, I think it's really important to help people with experiences of abuse and give them a chance to process their emotions surrounding that abuse, to deal with some of the horror and helplessness that often surrounds abuse. And that can also include a cognitive component where people learn to reappraise that abusive experience, to think about it differently, to learn, for example, that that abuse was not their fault and they didn't invite or deserve that treatment.
But if you break it down to maybe you could say lower levels on the spectrum of narcissism, where people do feel guilt and remorse and they do want to change. They might lack awareness and they lack empathy for others, but they could be taught that. If they can find a way to regulate their emotions internally, they will be less dependent on using others for supply to regulate their emotions.
If I shift from the research literature to my own experience, narcissism is a personality trait that is treatment interfering. To have treatment succeed, you want to have a bond and a relationship, a sense of teamwork and alliance and therapy. And narcissism often attacks and undermines that by having your client be critical of you, quick to fire you, quick to drop out of treatment. So you have to be actively working on narcissism so that it doesn't undermine treatment itself.
Now, a skilled attorney, a skilled therapist, a skilled mediator or judge would be able to recognize, hey, this person, they're not normal. They don't listen to reason. They're not going to come to the table and try to meaningfully negotiate. They're being delusional, they're lying, they're doing all these things, and that's coming out of this place of a disorder. But there are ways that you can try to lead them in the directions you want them to go, and you can use their own ego, their own grandiosity, their own deceptions. You can use their own manipulations and tactics against them in order to get them to move toward what you want the outcome to be.
And I just want people to understand that if you hope that the person who has narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder, if you hope they will change, your hope is not enough to get that person to change. There has to be more done. They have to themselves have a desire to change. They have to maybe seek therapy or guidance or education or speak to others and really absorb that feedback. And this can be very hard for them because they're often very fragile. So it's hard for them to get feedback because it can flip from the grandiose right to the self-deprecating and worthless. And then they feel so guilty, and then people end up comforting them, which sucks them back into the dynamic.
I went to law school quite a long time ago. And in order to go, I was married at the time. We had a child, a couple of children. So we had to have, if I didn't get a scholarship, I couldn't go. There's a particular scholarship at the Dalhousie Law School called Sir James Dunn Scholarship that I applied for. And it required me to go down and have an interview with a group of the faculty members. And in the course of that, I was asked the question, could you have represented Hitler? And my response instantaneously was, well, I thought everyone was entitled to a defense, to present their defense. They got to be proven that in court that they did something wrong. Not by the press, not by anyone else. It has to be proven in court. So, could I have represented Hitler is a different question. I couldn't represent him if I couldn't give him 100% of my ability. So I probably never could have represented Hitler because I couldn't have given him the defense he was entitled to. But on the other hand, I've had cases, been involved with a situation as a defendant, and have offered the plaintiff what I consider to be a very reasonable amount of money. When I say the plaintiff, I'm talking about the counsel and so on. The counsel, they came back and refused it and asked for some ridiculous amount, as far as I was concerned. So we went to trial, and we won. The plaintiff got nothing. I walked out of there and almost threw up, because the plaintiff was entitled to something. But the plaintiff wasn't entitled to what they were saying, and it was, as it turned out, all or nothing.
A topic such as this can't be one-sided or seen from a single perspective. I started this project when the world shut down for the COVID-19 pandemic. I really wanted the people who have been diagnosed with NPD to have a voice,
We are paranoid as fuck.
I wanted them to be in this conversation, and I wanted them to have a say in what life is really like for them. I want them to be met with understanding, and I want to allow them to have a voice so as not to feel alienated. Maybe I'm a bit crazy here, but allowing that might just be a baby step towards someone working towards self-awareness and changed behavior. After all, a lot of victims of narcissistic abuse say that they're empaths, but yet the dictionary definition of empath is a person with the paranormal ability to apprehend the mental or emotional state of another individual. So I invite you to watch part 2, where I have an open and honest conversation with 3 diagnosed narcissists. This will allow them to tell you what life is like for them from their own perspective.